This is the story of a number that should change how you think about archaeology and ancient history. The number is 5%. That, according to some of the most respected voices in the field, is roughly how much of the global archaeological record has actually been excavated. 5%. Which means that everything we believe about who built civilization, when they built it, and how far back our story really goes, is constructed from a fragment so small it would fit on a single shelf of a museum basement. And that's before we get to the things we'll never recover at all. Modern archaeology presents itself as a settled science. The textbooks have timelines, the museums have plaques. There's a confident, linear story that runs from the first hunter-gatherers to Sumer, to Egypt, to Greece, to us. But beneath that confidence is a discipline quietly grappling with three enormous blind spots. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. The first is the problem of decay. When archaeologists dig, they find what survives: stone, bone, fired, ceramic, some metals. That's more or less the menu. Almost everything else, the things that made up the actual texture of an ancient life, is gone. Wood rots, leather rots, cloth rots, food rots, paper, papyrus, and skin all decay within centuries in most climates. This is what archaeologists call taphonomy, the science of how organic materials decay and disappear from the archaeological record. Wooden structures, which may have housed the majority of the human population for tens of thousands of years, vanish completely. Entire technologies built from organic materials, baskets, ropes, nets, looms, boats, leave no trace at all. What this means is brutally simple. If an ancient civilization built primarily in wood, used primarily organic tools, and wrote on primarily perishable material, it would be, to a modern archaeologist, almost invisible. We'd find a few stone foundations, some pottery shards, maybe a burial, and we'd call it a small village, even if it had been a city of 50,000 people. The second blind spot is the problem of discovery. We don't find ancient sites by scanning the entire surface of the earth. We find them by looking where we expect them to be. River valleys, known historical regions, places where development projects accidentally unearth something. The deserts of Egypt and the floodplains of Mesopotamia weren't chosen because they were the most likely places for early civilization. They were chosen because the dry climate preserved what was there. Every textbook map of the cradle of civilization, what we call the Fertile Crescent, is in part a map of where things didn't rot. And the older a site is, the deeper it tends to be buried. After 10,000 years, a settlement can lie under 15, 20, 50 meters of sediment. Modern survey techniques, even ground-penetrating radar, struggle to reach those depths. Coastlines have shifted. Sea levels have risen approximately 100 to 120 meters since the last glacial maximum, which means that anything built near the shore by the people who lived through the Younger Dryas is now somewhere on the floor of the continental shelf, underwater. Unexcavated, unknown. When archaeologists talk about the cradle of civilization, they're really talking about the cradle of civilization that we've managed to find. The third blind spot is the most insidious, because it lives inside the discipline itself. It's the problem of interpretation. Archaeologists, like all human beings, see what they expect to see. The framework they're trained in shapes the questions they ask. The questions they ask shape the answers they get, and the answers they get reinforce the framework. For most of the last 200 years, the framework has been gradualism, the assumption that human civilization developed slowly, in a roughly linear way, beginning with simple hunter-gatherers and progressing in stages toward complexity. Anything that didn't fit this story was, almost by reflex, explained away. And then there are the moments when reality refused to be explained away. In the 1860s, a German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann announced that he was going to find the city of Troy. The archaeological establishment of the time considered this absurd. Troy was a myth, the setting of Homer's poetry, no more historical than Atlantis. Schliemann was an amateur. He had no academic training. He was, in the polite language of the day, a crank. He found it. The site at Hisarlik in Turkey contained not one Troy but 9, stacked on top of each other across thousands of years. The myth, it turned out, had a stone foundation. In 1879, a Spanish nobleman named Marcelino Sanz de Sautuola discovered, in a cave on his property at Altamira, paintings of bison so vivid and so technically sophisticated that they looked, to the leading archaeologists of Europe, impossible. Stone Age humans, the experts insisted, weren't capable of art at that level. Sautuola was publicly accused of forgery. He died with his name in disgrace. 2 decades later, after similar paintings began turning up in caves across France, the scientific community quietly admitted he had been right all along. And then, in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began excavating a hill in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. What he found pushed the start date of monumental human architecture back by roughly 7,000 years. T-shaped stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, carved with the figures of animals, arranged in concentric circles, built by people who, according to every textbook in existence, shouldn't have been capable of building anything of the kind. The site is at least 11,500 years old, confirmed through radiocarbon dating. It predates pottery, it predates agriculture, it predates almost every assumption the discipline had about the order in which human civilization developed. Göbekli Tepe, along with its contemporary Neolithic site Çatalhöyük, fundamentally challenged the linear model of human development. Each of these discoveries had something in common. Each was, before it was made, considered impossible. Each pushed the human story dramatically deeper into the past. And each was, in its moment, resisted by the very experts whose job it was to find such things. Which raises the question that hangs over the whole discipline. If we've excavated 5% of what's potentially there, if most of what was ever built has rotted into nothing, if the sites we're most likely to find are the ones the climate preserved and the ocean didn't swallow, if the framework we use to interpret what we find is structured to expect simplicity and dismiss complexity, then how confident really should we be that the timeline in the textbook is the right one? This isn't a call to believe everything. There's a vast distance between acknowledging archaeology's limitations and accepting every fringe theory about Atlantis or ancient astronauts. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, the lost technologies of Egypt, the megalithic strangeness of Peru, these are debates that deserve to be had on the evidence, not dismissed by reflex. But the honest position is this: modern archaeology isn't failing because its practitioners are dishonest. It's failing because the task is impossibly large, the evidence is catastrophically incomplete, and the discipline has, again and again, mistaken the small fragment it can see for the whole picture. We're not reading the book of the human past. We're reading a few torn pages, scattered across a floor, in a language we're still learning to translate. And the experts who insist that the story is finished are the same kind of experts who once told a Spanish nobleman that his cave paintings were a hoax. Somewhere, beneath the silt of a river that has changed its course, beneath the waves of a coastline that has long since drowned, beneath the dust of a continent we haven't thought to dig, the next chapter is waiting. We just have to be humble enough to look.